Okay, just a really quick video here on how to create terrain. A couple of you mentioned in an email that you're really interested in creating some complex terrain. Right now all you know how to do is just flat areas, and maybe you can import some stuff from the asset store, or maybe something from Maya or something like that, but I haven't really shown you how to create some really intricate terrain. So I'm going to just do this introductory video and kind of get you guys started. Hopefully this will spark some of your imagination here. The first thing you'll need to do is go into your scene and actually create a terrain. So if you go up to Game Object, go down to 3D Object, and then go down to Terrain, it's going to create a terrain whose corner is at the point of origin. And you notice that the terrain is quite large, and the texture on the terrain is checkerboard. Now, if I was to push play on this, you'll notice that my ball drops down. Give it a second here. Notice that my ball drops down, and you can actually see the checkerboard pattern on the background. So whereas in Photoshop, the checkerboard pattern usually means transparency, in Unity you can actually see the checkerboard pattern. The reason why they apply the checkerboard pattern is, as a default, is so that you can tell when you're rolling along something. Because if it was just a solid color, you wouldn't even be able to tell you were rolling along it. So anyway, this is our terrain right here. I'm going to select the terrain, and I'm going to push F to sort of fill the frame with it. Now you can always change the characteristics of the terrain. You can resize it and whatnot. But what I want to show you today is how to affect the terrain. So anyway, I'm going to select the terrain. So I have the terrain selected here, and there's a couple different tools over here. The first one is your settings tool, and this is how you can change the aspect of your terrain here. You can change some of the shadows of your terrain. You can change the material of your terrain right here. For those of you who know how to use Photoshop, you can actually create a pretty convincing map here with like green areas where you want the low parts to be, gray areas where you want the Rocky Mountains to be, maybe white areas on top where you want the snow to be, and you can apply it right there. You can also add trees right here, pretty self-explanatory. If you're putting in grass, you can set wind settings for the grass, pretty cool little effect. Mesh resolution, right now the terrain width is 1,000, the length is 1,000. The height, the maximum height is 600, so if you want your peaks to be a little bit less than that, you can change that. And then you have some different resolutions. You can do texture resolutions, you can change your lighting, light mapping, all sorts of stuff. It does have a terrain collider on it, so when my ball falls down, it's going to actually bounce off of it. But I'd like to take you back up here and take you over to this right here where it says Paint Terrain. This is probably the most interesting one. This one right here where it says Create Neighbor Terrains. You can create terrains in these areas right here that connect with this one. You can see right there where there's some continuity going across there. You can also paint trees. Like I can use a brush and actually paint trees around here. The first thing I need to do is actually define what trees I wanted in here. So I'd have to go over to the asset store, get a tree, and be able to actually put it in there. So it's pretty cool. You can also kind of get funky with the brushes here. But the main thing I want to show you is the Paint Terrain tool. So if you look here, you've got a bunch of different brushes. Now the brushes work a lot like, well, kind of look at these as you would a mask in Photoshop. So this brush right here, see how the white towards the middle and then it fades out towards black. So think about this as a mask. So a mask in Photoshop, white shows the effect and black hides the effect. So if I move over here with this brush, let me kind of zoom in a little bit here. The part of this brush where it's going to show the effect or change the height of it the most is right there at the middle. So if I push, kind of move this around, gives you these nice sort of rolling hills. Okay. Now if you wanted to reduce that, if you look over here, it says left click to raise, hold shift and left click to lower. So if I hold down shift and click on it, then it's going to lower it. So if you maybe you took this a little bit too high, or maybe you wanted a little, a sharp edge on one side and a sloping edge on the other, you can change it by holding down shift. So a lot of these are really creative, really interesting brushes if you give them a chance. So like this one right here. If I want this to be larger, you guys remember in Photoshop how you hit the right and left brackets to make the brush larger or smaller. Same thing in Unity. If you hit the right bracket, it makes the brush a little bit larger. The left bracket makes the brush a little bit smaller. So I'm going to click and drag. Makes a pretty cool little effect right there. Now what you don't want to do is create the same mountain, over and over again. It looks kind of weird if you create the same mountain over and over again. Because it'd be pretty much impossible for two mountains to have the exact same texture. So what I would do is, maybe choose a different one. Maybe make this one a little bit higher. Go in. Certainly you're not at a loss for brushes here. Let's go over here. Got some pretty interesting slopes over there. Switch brushes. You can kind of go over here. Maybe you want the brush to be a little bit larger. As you go over here, maybe do this on the corner. Okay, so that's how you create a terrain. You got plenty of brushes here to work with. Between this and bringing in stuff from TurboSquid or the Asset Store, should be able to create a pretty cool, set where your ball can kind of roll around here. So let me actually go back over to my player here. Focus on my, focus on my player. Zoom out a little bit here, and I'm going to put, I was going to put my player and my camera over above this. You guys can see what it looks like here. My computer's just running really slow for some reason, so give me a minute. So as I move this over here, if I push play, again, my computer's running really, really slow, so it might take a minute for this to show up. But your player has a collider on it, and the terrain also has a collider on it. So the player is going to fall down against the terrain. So it falls down against the terrain, and again, I apologize for how sloppy my computer is running right now. But now you have this really cool looking terrain that you can go around. It takes a lot to slow your ball down. So maybe if you want to set up the edges of your terrain to be really tall mountains, that would probably be a good idea. So that's just a really quick tutorial. The next tutorial that I'm going to be doing is how to use the terrain tool along with your skills in Photoshop to create a map that has some interesting textures on it. So that'll be the next.